But this relationship turned really intense really quickly. Because we knew each other so well before, I think we skipped over a lot of the shit that happens normally when you date a person. You know what I mean? We already knew each other. We knew each other's quirks. We knew what we liked and what we didn't like. We had all this history together. So this relationship got super intense really fast. And, you know, I love yous came real quick. You know, it seemed abnormal, but it was really intense. We were all over each other constantly. And about 6 months into our relationship, my dad found out that I had dropped out of college. I was lying and telling him I was still going to college. And in fact, I was not attending college anymore. My dad got really pissed and told me that I had 2 months to get the fuck out of his house. That I had broken the little contract that I had with him, which was, you know, you'll have a place to stay as long as you're in school. I lied to him. He wanted me out. And I made a really tough decision. I had a friend that moved to Arizona. I grew up in California and lived in California at this point and live in California now. But I had this friend that after high school, he'd moved to Arizona and gone to school there, and he was constantly calling me from Arizona saying, Paul, you got to move down here. You got to come to Arizona. And it's a great place, awesome jobs. And I decided that that's what I was going to do. And I broke her heart. And she never forgave me for it. Because I felt like at that point in time, I needed to get out. I needed to get away from my family. I needed to get away from my friends. I needed to learn what it was to be an adult and be on my own and pay my own bills and have a job and an apartment. And I didn't think that was going to be possible for me. I could have moved in with a friend and slept on a friend's couch. I could have moved in with her and slept on her couch or something. But I didn't even consider that shit. I wanted to do it right, but it broke her heart. And I don't think throughout the entirety of our relationship she ever forgave me for that. And I begged her, you know, please move down there with me. Just come on. You know, her job wasn't all that great. I said, you don't have anything going here. I don't have any. Let's just go together. Let's do it together. And she said, I can't do it. And then finally she relented and said, look, I can't go when you go, but let me tie up some loose ends around here and I'll come down eventually. And that's the point. Here's where the biggest regret comes into it. That's the point where our relationship should have ended. And I wish I was mature enough at that point to see that I should have just broke that relationship off, because the prospect of having 6 or 8 months worth of a long-term relationship, it doesn't work. And that's my biggest regret. I wish I could have gone back to that point in my life and stopped myself from perpetuating that relationship. Because up until that point, we'd had this beautiful relationship. I think that had it ended there, it would be a sad, but in a lot of ways really joyous memory for me. Because we were really like intensely in love. We loved each other and would have done anything for one another. And to have the relationship break up there, yeah, it would have been ugly, but I think I would have good memories of that relationship. Whereas I have nothing but ugly memories of that relationship. So I moved to Arizona, I got a job and got an apartment, and then she moved down, and things were okay for a couple of months, and then our relationship was shit. And it drug on for 5 years. And it was emotionally abusive. At some points it got physically abusive. Not me. I'm not a wife puncher. But, I was like one of those Maury Povich guys that goes on Maury Povich and is the battered. She would get really, like when we'd argue, she was really physical. And I don't know if it fucked me up or not, but it sucked. I mean, nobody likes being slapped and hair pulled and shit. And it was a nasty, ugly relationship. And I never would have ended it. And we ended up living in Arizona for 3 years. We moved back to California. Our relationship was horrible on every level. And yet it was outwardly one of those relationships that everybody that I knew was really jealous of. They were like, oh, you guys are so good together. You guys are the greatest couple. And we played that role in public. But in private, we just couldn't stand to be around each other. And it was really hurtful and ugly. And the best thing that she ever did for me was to finally leave me one day. She left me out of the blue one day. She had gone to house sit for a friend or something. I don't know what it was. One of her friends had broken up with her boyfriend, and she went to go stay with her overnight. She was crying, and I called her the next day, and she's like, I'm not coming home. And it devastated me. It was, to this point, the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. Because I was so invested in the relationship. Even though it was ugly, I was so invested and so believed that I would have done anything to perpetuate that relationship. And it just, I never would have ended it. I was so committed. And she did. She left me, and it was the worst thing that ever happened. I mean, it devastated me. It completely uprooted me from my life. I developed really rapidly a huge drug problem because of it. I started, and up until this point, I wasn't exactly chaste when it came to drugs. But I started, I was smoking a lot of weed and drinking a lot anyway. But I started, all the time, whereas, maybe it was like every weekend or maybe 2 or 3 times a week I would get drunk or smoke weed. It was every day, before work, after work, all night long till I fell asleep crying. It was really that pathetic. Fell asleep crying. And then on top of it, I started popping pills. I started taking Vicodin by the handful. And anybody that's ever taken those 3 types of drugs at once knows that this feeling that you get when you're spun on Vicodin and high and drunk off your ass all at once, it's this complete out-of-body experience. You're just like, you're not even a human anymore. You're an animal. You know what I mean? You're just, I mean, literally that bad. There are times where I dragged myself into bed, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to wake up. Like, if I go to sleep, I'm not going to wake up. And I was okay with it. It's probably the closest to suicidal I've ever been. I wasn't actively, or at least consciously, attempting to overdose or kill myself, but I would have been okay with it, if I had just died. And it still to this day affects the person that I am. It's probably one of the most galvanizing moments I've had growing up. And it put a scar on me that'll never heal. It'll never heal. That'll never fully go away for me. And it's adversely affected every relationship that I've been in since then, in one way or another. And I've worked really hard to work through the issues, and luckily I have a very understanding wife who I've told this story to and understands how painful that was for me, that period of time and that whole relationship. But yeah, that's my biggest regret. Really roundabout way, probably a lot more info than you wanted, but there you go.